Hi everyone, welcome to Beyond the Pale. I am going to discuss Howard Blum's part 5 of The Eyes of a Killer, published by Airmail. I did read parts 1 and 2, and I have obviously got 3 and 4 to catch up on. I haven't looked at those, but I started looking around online and it popped up and I read it, and yeah, it's blooming interesting. I thoroughly recommend you read this article because there have been lots of YouTube commenters who really don't like the thought this could be DRUG related. Many believe it is. Obviously, Howard Blum is asking this question in this article. I'm going to put the link down below. Now, I have read several commenters saying they had to pay to read this article. Now, I have never had to pay to read the articles. I've only had to submit my email address. So hopefully it's the same for you. If you do have issues, head over to Bella Lugosi, Bedtime Stories with Bella Lugosi. I'll put the link below there. And she reads it word for word, and you can get the whole article that way too. Now, of course, Howard Blum is a journalist. Okay, journalists. But he does seem to do his own groundwork, his own investigative journalism, and he certainly speaks to some key people who live in the area, and it's really an intriguing thing to read. He answers a big question for me, and that is why Emma Bailey and Demetrius Robinson's case got thrown out. I just had no idea. Well, guess what, guys? It was all down to a technicality. So the judge dismissed the case without prejudice, so that means it can be refiled in the same court of law if the authorities draft a new and more carefully drawn indictment. But why it got thrown out? It was consequential. Basically, they were scheduled to be tried in the county where the death had occurred rather than where the Coca-Cola, if you know what I mean, had been originally ingested. And that is the reason why the judge threw the case out. And there is one very angry detective who found Young's body who says they're not going to let the case disappear. So, guys, watch the space. I'm not convinced that Robinson and Bailey are going to get off with this, but I still question why the DUI wasn't, why nothing's happened with that. I mean, and, we all saw the video, didn't we, where she shoved something in the bin? I think there's more to it. However, that is, according to Blum, the official reason they got off with this. So that answered a big question for me. Now, Blum does talk about the prosecution kind of gloating. He gets the sense that they're laughing, thinking, oh, yeah, some other guy did it. No other guy did it. We've got our guy. He then asks the question, but have they? And I love the fact he does like a balanced thing. He thinks that possibly the prosecution have a case, but then goes on to say, but you know what? There's no victim DNA. Things aren't. He basically says it's more of an open case than a shut case at the moment, and so many of us feel the same way. But what's really, really interesting is he talks to the sheriff. Now, let me find. He's another Brett. It is Brett Myers, head of the Quad City Drug Task Force. Now, he has the territory that includes the university town of Moscow and Pullman, along with the Lewis Clark State College in Lewiston, Idaho. And he offers a ground level account. Now, this is where, our ears really need to prick up here. The sheriff says, because he is not under the gag order, he states that his task force is working with college kids in the local schools, and I assume universities, maybe I shouldn't assume, but he works with the kids who've been caught dealing MDMA and Coca-Cola, flipping them, and then using the students to go after the big local dealers. Quote, and once the scared witless college kids have helped his team ID the foot soldiers, he says, we go up the ladder to get the people tied to the cartels in the cities. Blum says, this sounds pretty dangerous for the kids. Sheriff says it could be. There are some seriously tough guys running this business. Full of resolve, though, he adds, but we're game to do that every day of the week. Now, I have often thought, what if one of the victims in 1122 King Road was an informant? What if one of those kids had been found dealing and then were kind of forced into ratting out local dealers to law enforcement and it went really bad? What did you tell Adam? I told Adam everything. It is pretty shocking that this sheriff is stating this quite clearly to Howard Blum. He also says, quote, there are a lot of unanswered questions. Pressed further, he goes on, could it have been a drug-related case? I can't rule it out. It's not improbable. From what I know, that would answer a lot of questions. It just makes more sense to me than a PhD criminology student with no motive, no digital data that ties him to the victims, nothing that ties him to the victims, no victim DNA anywhere where he's been. This kind of makes a lot more sense to me. I don't know what you think, and I'd love you to comment below. So there we are. That is that sheriff's statement. Now we've got the church up next, and we've got, let me find his name, Wilson. He really has a thing for the government and law enforcement, doesn't like them very much at all. I'm just scrolling through. Wilson, basically, he's the head of the town's ultra-conservative Christchurch. There's probably corruption there as well, but possibly we've got two sets of corruption logging heads. We've got the church, the government and law enforcement not really getting on from what I gather from this article. So he says, last Christmas, just before Coburg's arrest, Wilson shared his raw feelings about the town fathers in one of the weekly encyclicals, I think that's what it says, that he sent to his flock. Quote Doug Wilson from the church, our local city government, law enforcement included, is a nest of incompetence and corruption. If the additional scrutiny over the murder cases is part of what brings about a much-needed house cleaning, then we should be grateful for that, but without any unlawful gloating. So he's basically saying, if these murders clean up what the hell is going on in this town, then they should be grateful for it. Very, very interesting. He also says, you'd think we'd be a natural constituency for Back the Blue, but after what we have experienced, I think that if any of my parishioners are on the jury, I tell them to go in with an open mind. He also says that if a Moscow cop were to testify against Coburger, his parishioners would have reason to be sceptical. After all, he says, we know that their officers have lied on the stand before, referring to the cases involving his son and grandson. Now, I did look into this, and all I could find was that Doug Wilson's son or grandson spoke publicly without masks on during the coronavirus pandemic. If you know anything else, please comment below, but I couldn't find anything worse than that. But what's really interesting, he finishes by saying, this is Doug Wilson, there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered. He concluded with a firm and indignant blast. I think it's very possible the prosecution has the wrong man. So some really interesting stuff in that article. In a nutshell, we've got Emma Bailey, Demetrius Robinson, their case getting thrown out on a technicality. We've got a drug task force sheriff who says, you know what, if this was drug related, this would kind of make more sense. And yeah, we do use students to rat out the dealers. And we have the church saying they don't trust law enforcement or the government as far as they could throw them. So head over to the article, have a really good read. It does cover other things like the pool party and DNA or lack of in the car. And it's a really interesting read. And I think it's full of stuff that we've been suspicious of. There's stuff that we've been thinking about. And I truly think Howard Blum has gone out there to find his own answers. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And tomorrow is Spooky Sunday. I'm going to do a Spooky Sunday and I am going to attempt a live. So watch the space. I'm going to give it my best shot. And thank you all for your support. It means the world. Take care. I will see you tomorrow.